This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good afternoon. We're coming on the air right now with a major update just out about a life-threatening hurricane about to hit Florida. Hurricane Helene, right now a powerful Category 3 storm, shaping up to be one of the biggest to ever hit the Gulf Coast. It's a monster storm, an astonishing 500 miles in diameter. Florida's Big Bend now in the bullseye. The storm surge you hear so much about, that's expected to be catastrophic. More than 20 feet of water expected to flood coastal areas. And get this, the winds pushing all of that water are up to 125 miles an hour as we come on. To make matters worse, there are now even tornado warnings in the storm zone. I want to go right to Al Roker now for the latest tracking. Al.
Yeah, you know, Lester, here's the thing, 125 miles per hour. That's 5 miles per hour away from a Category 4 storm. This thing still has some runway to get through, so it could very well make Category 4 by the time it makes landfall. Moving northeast at 23 miles per hour, so it is picking up its forward motion. And as you mentioned, tornado watches from the Carolinas all the way down into central Florida. We've got some tornado warnings just south of Tampa, so we're going to be watching that very closely. Right now, we've got tropical storm warnings from Asheville all the way down to Key West, but hurricane warnings stretching right now from Albany, Georgia, just to the north, on into the Big Bend and parts of the Panhandle. Here's the system. We expect it to make landfall sometime tonight between 8 and 11 p.m. right now as a Category 3, but it could very well become a Category 4 storm. The hurricane force winds extend out 100 miles from the center of the storm. So this is a powerful system that's going to make its way. Look at this. It will still be predicted to be a Category 2 storm on Friday when it passes by Atlanta. Last time they were in a hurricane warning was 2018, and then it continues on up toward Nashville as a very intense low pressure system. But this thing is going to wreak a lot of havoc. So the storm surge that you were talking about, Lester, 10 to 20 feet from Apalachicola on just south of Cedar Key, the Big Bend area. This could travel about 9 miles inland along some of the rivers, and the winds are going to be very, very strong. Cedar Key could see gusts of 100 miles per hour, Tallahassee 110. Historic damage likely for Tallahassee, and then Atlanta 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts, Knoxville 55. We're probably going to see airport delays and or closures, and with all of that, we're going to be looking at power outages from Tallahassee to Atlanta, but extending all the way to the coast, from widespread to scattered power outages. And, of course, the flash flood risk from Tallahassee to Asheville, life-threatening river and flash flooding, a major flood event likely across the Appalachians. In the Big Bend area, Florida Panhandle, upwards of 20 inches of rain, but we could be looking at up to a foot as you get to Atlanta, Nashville, Knoxville, and Memphis as well, Lester. So,
and again, the forward speed on this is
moving northeast 23 miles per hour. So you get those 125 mile per hour winds. You add to that motion, that forward motion, and that's what makes this storm surge so dangerous. And coming in at about anywhere between 8 and 11 o'clock, that's when we're going to start to see high tides from all along the coast there. So we're going to be watching this very closely. But that storm surge is where most deaths occur, and unfortunately, it's going to be at night. So that's going to make it even harder for people to deal with.
All right, Al Roker. Al, thanks very much. Tom Yamas is in Tallahassee, where it is starting to rain. The big impact, though, coming after nightfall. Tom, what are you seeing?
Lester, great to be with you right now. Let's start right where the concern is and where the danger is right now at this hour. Al showed us how big that hurricane is. It is a monster of a storm stretching all the way from Tallahassee all the way down to Fort Myers. There's already storm surge flooding in areas like Fort Myers, areas like the Tampa Bay, where people are seeing the rush of water just come in. This is the major concern. Where we are in the Big Bend area, the National Hurricane Center has been very blunt. They're saying that this storm surge could be anywhere from 15 to 20 feet. They say that is unsurvivable, not to play games with that. Because of that, several of those outer communities, the communities that are right on the water, have been evacuated. We were out at one of those earlier today as people were packing up their businesses and moving out. The hurricane hunters have also been flying over Hurricane Helene as well to see how this hurricane is shaping, how it is forming. And one of the big stories about this hurricane is how quickly it came together. It may not have been on people's radar earlier in the week, and now people have evacuated. They're hunkering down. Here in in Tallahassee, they are preparing for a storm. Many officials have said, like, one they've never seen before, right? Sometimes Tallahassee gets hit either on the east side or the west side, but a direct hit has not happened with a hurricane of this magnitude. Just over my shoulder here, you can see some big, beautiful, they're called live oak trees, and that's one of the big concern right now, right? Because they give you treetop cover, they are beautiful, but when they come down, it can be incredibly dangerous as people are trying to rescue others or as the recovery effort gets underway. This, of course, is the capital of Florida. This is where Governor DeSantis lives. This is where the state of Florida is operated from. And again, they have never seen a storm quite like this. When you look behind my shoulder, it may look like it's very calm right now, and that's because it is. It has not started yet. This is quite literally the calm before the storm. But tonight, when this hurricane hits, it's even more dangerous because a nighttime hurricane, things can happen and you don't see them right away. But I've spoken to emergency officials in this area. They tell me that they have been pre-positioned in different parts of Tallahassee and along the coast to make sure that if anybody needs to be rescued, if it's safe for them to get out, they're going to go out there and rescue them. We also have to talk about the college community here, right? About a quarter of the population in Tallahassee are college kids. Some of them got out. Not everyone did. We've been told that the shelters have opened at Florida State University and Florida A&M, right now housing about 700 students in those shelters. Lester?
Yeah, likely a much very different scene behind you tomorrow. All right, Tom Yamas, thank you. Perry, Florida is about an hour south of Tallahassee. Our Jesse Kirsch is there. Jesse?
Lester, a very blunt request from officials here tonight. They're telling people who have not heeded a mandatory evacuation request to write their name and their date of birth on their body in permanent markers so their bodies can be identified. That is what they're asking residents to prepare for here. You can see it is largely a ghost town here in Perry, but there are still cars on the road. We have still seen people on foot. And officials are so concerned about the conditions that we could be seeing here this evening. The sheriff tells me they have not even opened a shelter here. If people need to access to transportation, they are partnered with Uber. Officials are partnered with Uber to get people out. There are also buses that have been offered. They are trying to get people to shelters in other counties. The sheriff is that concerned about a shelter here caving in. We are going to potentially get the brunt of the winds, the powerful hurricane-force winds here in Taylor County, Florida. And if that happens, that would effectively be like a tornado. We're overhead here for over an hour. And it is that prolonged exposure to those powerful wind gusts which could weaken structures and create real concern for life because of the wind. But there's also the threat of that storm surge here, 10 to 20 feet possibly in the coastline. And the sheriff estimates that around 200 people have refused the request to leave their homes along the coastline here in Taylor County. Again, that is 10 to 20 people, 200 people roughly that could be in 10 to 20 feet of storm surge. What has been described as unsurvivable conditions. People that are among that group that officials are asking to put their name and their identifiable information on their body in case of the worst, which we could be seeing tomorrow. Lester.
All right, Jesse, thanks. And off to the right of Jesse, that picture showing how powerful these storm surges can be. Literally a wall of water being pushed along by those winds far out at sea. That concludes this NBC News special report. This, of course, is a developing story. We'll be covering it throughout the night on our streaming channel, NBC News Now. And I'll have the very latest, and we see you shortly here in the East on NBC Nightly News. For now, I'm Lester Holt in New York. Good day.
And I'm Tom Costello at NBC News in Washington. You are watching that special report with Lester on Hurricane Helene, and we're back now continuing coverage on that storm. And now, as you heard, a Category 3, likely to become an extremely dangerous Category 4 hurricane by landfall between 8 and 11 p.m. This is a live look right now at Helene's impact across Florida as we speak, out in Tallahassee, where Helene is expected to hit dead on. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is speaking at a press conference. Take a look at where this hurricane is headed. Over 1,000 flights have already been canceled in the area tonight. More than 173,000 people without power. We've got our team posted up and across the entire Gulf Coast tonight. The FEMA chief says Tallahassee will take a dead-on hit from this storm, the most powerful storm to hit the city in its history. Let's go to NBC's Kathy Park, who is there for us right now. So, Kathy, storm surge isn't the concern where you are per se, but we're hearing possibly 1,000 trees could come down with this storm.
Tom, that's absolutely right. And that is the big worry here in Tallahassee. It has the designation of being a tree city. And when you look around, we're actually by a park in downtown Tallahassee. We are surrounded by vegetation. In fact, 55% of the city is under tree canopy. So you can only imagine what could potentially happen when you have 100-mile-per-hour winds push through this area and stay over this area for an extended period of time. We could be looking at downed trees, lots of debris on the ground, down power lines, and of course, widespread power outages. Earlier today, Tom, we had a chance to go to an emergency shelter nearby. It was filling up very quickly. Right now, we do know it is not at capacity, but a lot of these folks, they were telling me they have lived through a lot of storms living here in Tallahassee, but they are fearful as to what a Category 3, potentially a Cat 4 hurricane could do. Here's what they told me.
I just felt like the storm was different. Just gut feeling. It was just different. It's big, its size, the wind speed. I just felt like this was different. It was the best thing to do.
We've never been through a hurricane like this big, and we would just rather be safe than, just in case.
And Tom, we were told if you are in one of these shelters, they will not let you go in and out during the height of the storm, and for good reason, of course, safety first. We should also point out that the city of Tallahassee, they are preparing for days ahead of this storm, but obviously we just don't know what Mother Nature will decide to do as it makes landfall in the next few hours. So they're saying that they're leaning on the help of mutual aid. They have crews coming in from 9 different states. They have tripled their workforce. Tom?
All right, NBC's Kathy Park in Tallahassee. Let's go south of her. Let's go down to Tampa right now, where Mayor Jane Castro is standing by. And Mayor Castro, we are now just hours away from landfall, with experts warning it could cause catastrophic damage across Florida. So hurricanes are kind of a part of life along the Gulf Coast. How are you preparing there? And by the way, I meant to say Castor, but go ahead.
That's okay, Tom. Well, we are prepared here, and it is getting dicey outside. We're up over 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts now. We've closed down the bridges throughout the Tampa Bay region, and it's too late for individuals to evacuate now. They need to just stay where they're at in place, and hopefully we won't have to do any rescues. But we have been getting that word out to our community to get out of that zone A, out of the way of the water. But we wholly expect to have 5 to 8 foot tidal surge coming in here. Fortunately for us, it will coincide with lower tides in our area. So that's going to save us anywhere from 2 to 3 feet in the height of the water from this storm.
I think we're looking at a split screen here, and if I'm not mistaken, that's the bridge just south of you on 275. You sent out a mandatory evacuation order for everybody in Zone A, those folks living closest to the water or in mobile homes. Are people listening, and are they heeding the warning?
I think that the people are listening to this. As you said before, we've all grown up with the hurricanes, and individuals become complacent. But there's just something different about this storm, the way that it's covered the entire state, just the breadth of it. And we saw from Adalia with those warm Gulf waters, how quickly these storms can go from one category to the next. I think we're going to see this with Helene as well, unfortunately, for my friends up in the Panhandle.
Yeah, we're watching them closely. It is the storm surge that could impact and hit your bay and the shore there. What's your biggest concern as you go into the night?
Our biggest concern is that surge, the storm surge that's going to come in. With the wind, we can take that even if it gets up to the hurricane level with those bands. But as Helene goes past us, it's those back bands that are going to bring that water into our bay with a vengeance, and it's going to be fast and furious.
Well, I remember a few years ago when all the water was sucked out of the bay in Tampa and also in Sarasota. I know it can happen so quickly. I'm just curious, given the fact that you're going into nightfall, given the fact that we've got the rain already picking up and the winds, are you pulling emergency responders off the roads during the worst of the storm, or are they going to stay out in the elements?
We do most services. We pull people off of the streets at 35 miles an hour. Our officers are still out there at certain locations, making sure that those flooded roadways, that individuals are kept off of those. And as I said before, we're already having wind gusts of well over 50 miles an hour. So our first responders are still out there ensuring that our community stays safe, but there comes a point where their lives are in danger and they're going to come off the street as well.
Absolutely. Mayor, thank you. Mayor Jane Castor, we appreciate your time. Thank you and good luck tonight. The storm isn't just hitting Florida, of course. Our climate team expects Helene to remain at hurricane strength well over the next 12 hours as it moves through Georgia. NBC's Priscilla Thompson is in Valdosta, Georgia. Priscilla, I understand that you talked to local business owners there, one in particular who's been there for 65 years. What is he doing right now to prepare?
Yeah, Tommy McNeil has owned Laws Furniture for 65 years, and he was here with his grandkids, 13 and 6 years old, and this is what they were doing. They were sandbagging the front of the store. They were also putting plastic up on top of the furniture that is near the windows, just in case these windows do end up breaking as a result of this storm. Now, he tells me that they have not experienced severe damage in the past from storms, but they're not taking any chances. Take a listen.
I feel like I have the right insurance, but we want to prevent, as much as we can damage. It just makes it a lot easier from a cleanup standpoint. And so I'm not too worried about the business. It's going to survive. I would be more worried about ourselves, in a personal way.
And really quickly, I just want to give you a look at this downtown area here. It is fairly quiet, almost feels like a ghost town. It is quieting down as people are bracing for that rain to come. Now, folks here are not under an evacuation order. In fact, at our hotel, it's sold out because a lot of people from Florida actually evacuated to here. But Tommy says that as soon as this storm passes, he plans to be back here at his business to see how it held up, because he does hope to pass this business down to his grandkids and keep it in the family. Tom?
Again, we're watching the left side of the screen. That's the bridge just outside of Tampa. That's what's headed your way. What about tornado warnings in Georgia there? The governor, I understand, says that tornadoes could be a big concern. We heard that from Al Roker just a moment ago as well.
Yeah, Governor Kemp says that he is expecting a very strong possibility of tornadoes because Georgia is on the dirty side of this storm. And state officials have said they expect all 159 counties here to be impacted. Listen to the message that they had for residents today.
This storm hitting in the middle of the night with the potential for tornadoes and other things, people just need to be very, very, very weather aware. I would encourage people to make final preparations before this afternoon so that you'll be ready when the storm comes into our state.
And Tom, people do appear to be doing that. We passed a lot of stores that were already closed, and I will tell you the ones that were open, I passed a dollar store and the parking lot was packed. So it appears that people are trying to make those final preparations before that rain starts coming down here. Tom?
Okay, Priscilla, stay dry and stay safe. Thank you very much. Let's now go to Atlanta. They're bracing for severe flash flooding there with warnings that include Atlanta's airport, which, as you know, is the busiest in the world. And the city is asking folks there to sign up for text alerts right now. Let's bring in NBC's Priya Sridhar, who's in Atlanta. And again, I will tell the audience, Priya, that on the left-hand side of the screen, that's the Sunshine Skyway Bridge just south of Tampa. But the mayor there in Atlanta, I understand, is saying that the city is much better prepared than ever before for this kind of a storm. What has it done to brace for this one?
Yeah, so they've stood up an emergency operations center, and they're monitoring areas of the city that are more susceptible to flooding, including right behind me here. You might be able to see this is an extremely busy road, and we're at rush hour right now. So you can see lots of cars coming through here, and it's already somewhat flooded. Some people are taking caution and slowing down, but others are plowing right through. And this rain, by the way, Tom, that we're experiencing right now has actually nothing to do with Helene. And so this could just make make things worse when Helene's effects actually arrive here, because the ground is already saturated. So that's one of the big concerns right now when it comes to those flash flooding that you were talking about. But just like what Priscilla was talking about, we are also expecting up to 60-mile-per-hour winds here. And so that's going to have a huge impact, because this is known as the city of trees. There are a lot of big trees around that could throw down power lines. So another thing that the mayor is trying to urge residents is to prepare for potentially sustained power outages. Now, Governor Kemp did put 10,000 linemen from Georgia Power on standby to be able to respond to all of the power outages that they're anticipating. But of course, they're not going to be able to respond to those power outages, Tom, until the weather clears up.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk us through some of those preemptive steps that the city has taken. We know that schools have shut down there, and Helene has upended the MLB playoff race, right? What else is going on?
Yeah, that's right. So the Atlanta metro area schools have been closed both today and tomorrow. And the city and Fulton County and DeKalb County, the neighboring county, has basically closed all of their city and county offices for non-essential workers. Really what they're trying to do here is, unlike our friends down in Florida, who some of them had to undergo evacuation orders, here what they're really telling folks is to hunker down inside of your home and try to ride this out. They don't want people out on the roads where they could be at risk of downed trees falling on their cars, or also these car accidents that could happen right now. In addition to that, Governor Kemp has also mobilized about 500 Georgia guardsmen to help with debris cleanup. So we'll see if they're going to be utilized, and also the swiftwater rescue teams that are poised throughout the state to potentially deal with any stranded residents, Tom.
Okay, Priya, thank you. We are now looking there at a live shot from the Malacha Bridge, which is in Lee County, Florida. Again, this is a life-threatening Category 3 storm moving to the northeast at 23 miles per hour, still very much out in the Gulf of Mexico. 500 miles in diameter and 20 feet of water is the potential as it comes ashore there along the Big Bend area of Florida. 125 mile-per-hour winds already out in the Gulf of Mexico, already warnings and word of tornadoes in the storm zone. And we would also let you know that landfall, when it really comes ashore, is supposed to be between 8 and 11 p.m. tonight, when it's dark, and already we have reports of power outages. So this could be a long and terrifying night for those folks in the storm zone. Hurricane force winds reaching out 100 miles already from the center of the storm. And it could, according to Al Roker, travel about 9 miles inland, because this is so much of a storm surge and such powerful winds. Again, we're expecting that we're going to see 110 mile-per-hour winds when it hits Tallahassee. Let's go to NBC's Marissa Parra. She is in Tampa for us. And Marissa, Tampa's airport and the ports both shut down there. The Sunshine Skyway Bridge. Let's show that real quickly again. The Sunshine Skyway Bridge shot that we have. It's also closing, and anybody who's driven over that, and I do it several times a year, you see the winds there and the rain. That is a lot of activity already. It sounds like Tampa and St. Pete are both hunkering down for the night now, Marissa.
Absolutely. The message has been clear from the start, Tom. They have been asking people to heed mandatory evacuation orders for Zone A. Zone A, of course, being those closest to the shorelines that are prone to flooding and storm surge, because now it's too late. They have been asking people to get out while they can, particularly if you look at the map, you know that there's a lot of shoreline surface area, if you will, between Tampa Bay, the Gulf of Mexico, the channels, the rivers around here. But if you look specifically at Pinellas County, it's a peninsula that is flanked by both the Bay and the Gulf of Mexico. And so you just mentioned two major bridges that connect to Pinellas County. And this is a major place that residents have been asked, especially those in those very vulnerable places, Tom, to evacuate before it's too late, because you just mentioned two major ways for them to get out. Now it is going to be much, much harder. The rain, as you can tell, is taking a turn for the worse. It is coming down much harder than we have seen since we have been here, Tom. You can see the waters behind me getting choppier. We have observed since we've been here that water level beginning to rise. And again, Tampa Bay region expecting anywhere between 5 to 8 feet of storm surge. We were here for Hurricane Idalia. That is more than what we saw with Hurricane Idalia, and that was significant. I want to walk over here to show you a couple of things, because if you remembered our coverage from Hurricane Idalia, you'll remember Bayshore Boulevard here. It is prone to flooding and storm surge. We have seen the waves lapping over the sides there, and by the way, what you're seeing are people doing what authorities have asked them not to do. They're asking people to not go walk around and taking pictures. We'll get to that in just a moment. But you see those police cars over there. This is closed here. Again, trying to keep people safe. I want to show you something else, Tom. We highlighted this the other day, but when we're talking about protections that have been put in place, I'm going to have my photographer pan over to Tampa General Hospital. You may remember we talked about the aqua fence there. You can see how close it is to the water right there. It is fortified by an aqua fence. It gets to up to 10 feet. It's a barrier, a seal, if you will, and it protects them to upwards of 15 feet of storm surge. And that's important because that is the region's only level 1 trauma center. So, Tom, I want to point something else out. Yesterday, we saw people who were at sandbagging stations, and some of them were saying that they were taking precautions they'd never taken before because they remember what happened with Hurricane Ian. They have seen the rapid intensification further south, the impacts of that. You can see we're trying to keep a good view here, but that rain's coming down. And so we are seeing some people taking this more seriously than they might have before because of the impacts that Hurricane Ian left behind. And I will point out one last thing. We heard some stern words from the Pinellas County Sheriff saying it is a problem that he's still seeing people not heeding those evacuation orders, Tom.
Yeah, you know, you made a good point. The police are asking people not to go walk along the side of the water and take pictures. We coordinate with local authorities and our own health and security people to make sure that you are safe and that we're doing everything possible to be responsible, but also cover the storm. So thank you very much, Marissa, and we do want you to stay safe. To the north now, to North Carolina, worried about potentially historic flash flooding in a mountainous area that doesn't usually see things, or at least these types of intense storms. In one county, they're expecting water levels to hit record levels set more than a century ago. NBC's George Solis is in that county near Asheville, North Carolina. And George, we're hearing about evacuations in some parts of Asheville, which is really pretty far north from where the storm is right now.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. You can consider this sort of a practice run for what's to come. There's been a system that has stalled out here that's been dumping rain hour after hour here, leading to roads that look like this behind me that are completely saturated. That is a big concern as Helene slowly starts to make its way up here, delivering those strong winds and even more rain, leading to some of that catastrophic flooding. The National Weather Service, Tom, saying to expect flooding here that hasn't been seen in this region, this part of the state, in more than 100 years. So factor that into this. That is a rare warning from the Weather Service, especially for this part of the country. So people here, of course, heeding the warning. The governor, of course, declaring a state of emergency for this region ahead of Helene's arrival. But again, the key thing here, as you mentioned, people evacuating. At this point, there are no mandatory, at least here in this region. There are some voluntary ones. There are shelters that are open. But of course, all of this subject to change as we see this storm approaching and what it could bring over the next several hours. The concern here, the area is saturated. People have been trying to drive through some of these flooded waters, at least 2 since we've been here, both of them towed out here. But of course, the urgent reminder from the officials here to tell people to stay home right now. The other thing that we're seeing are trees that are toppling over. Actually, not far from where we are, there was a tree that fell on a nearby gas station, a tree that fell by a nearby home. And these threats are only going to ramp up in the overnight hours as Helene makes its way here. Could be a hurricane, could be a tropical system at that point. But nevertheless, as we await that storm's arrival, again, this area already drenched and looking at potentially more historic flooding, Tom.
George, thank you. We appreciate it. Let's just quickly let the audience know. On your left, you're looking there at the Malacha Bridge. That's in Lee County, Florida. That's south of Sarasota. And then the upper right is the bridge right outside, of course, of Tampa, the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. And it's already seen winds, according to the mayor, there are 50 miles per hour or more. And you're looking live at a stretch of I-275 in Tampa as Helene approaches. We're talking to FEMA about what its response looks like, plus how bad the insurance situation was in Florida even before this storm. Back now with our continuing coverage of Hurricane Helene as it appears to be directly tracking for the Florida coast, especially Tallahassee eventually and Big Bend. If we can, let's put up an idea, a map, I should say, a map of where exactly Helene is right now. It looks like it's several hundred miles west of Tampa. But as you can see, Tampa's already feeling the effects with strong winds and rain as this thing is tracking directly due north, again, for the Big Bend region of Florida. Let's bring in now Keith Turi. He is the acting director of response and recovery for FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Keith, what is FEMA's biggest concern right now with Helene really on the doorstep there of the Big Bend area?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Helene's obviously a very significant, very serious storm, extremely large storm. The wind field is over 350 miles for tropical storm force winds. So you have the entire state of Florida that is being impacted by those winds. And then it's going to bring, obviously, a historic storm surge to the Big Bend area. And then moving up into Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, that flooding risk from extreme rainfall, particularly in some of the mountainous areas. And so put that with the winds. This is going to be a multi-state incident. And going to bring multiple different types of hazards. And so the biggest concern always is at this point in time is making sure everybody is taking whatever actions they can to stay safe. These are the moments in which we can help people take the guidance of their local officials, evacuate if they're being told to evacuate, and prepare themselves to just make it through the storm. And then we can all move into recovery on the other side.
Again, the upper left-hand box there is Tampa, and we're told that right now this is about as close as the storm will come to Tampa, but it clearly is feeling the effects already. Once the storms actually pass, or the storm passes, I should say, how will FEMA move into the hardest hit areas?
Well, we've started preparing for this storm earlier this week, particularly with Florida. We started moving resources to the states, including our incident management teams, search and rescue teams, power restoration teams. They've all been pre-positioned. We're embedded in the state EOCs, and they are positioned appropriately to be able to move to whatever areas need our assistance. So that will start immediately after the conditions clear enough and it's safe to get out. And then we'll also work with the local officials on damage assessments and figuring out where we go from here. The president did declare emergencies for 4 states so far. That gives us the ability to provide those resources. We'll assess and see what other opportunities there are for additional types of assistance post-landfall.
I know that you've also already got urban search and rescue teams that have come into Florida from surrounding states, including as far north as Maryland and Virginia. And you've pre-positioned these search and rescue teams?
Yes, that's one of the key things we do. The state of Florida actually has a pretty robust search and rescue system, but even in a storm like this with the geographic scope and the intensity, we bring in additional resources to provide from other states for them to have access to. And then we've also pre-positioned other teams in the region that could move to whichever state needs them after the impacts there. So that's a big part of what we do, is getting prepared and making sure everything is positioned and set so we can all move together quickly to make that response as efficient as possible.
And just looking at the current power of this storm, I don't want to blindside you here, but do you have an early guesstimate for how long the cleanup and the recovery might take compared to previous storms, given the size of this thing that's headed for Big Bend?
Yeah, I mean, this is a significant storm, a Category 4 storm, particularly with that storm surge. It's going to be a long road of cleanup. Again, the phases will be first and foremost, keep people safe, make sure people are in a safe location, then get those lifelines, power, water, et cetera, up and running. And then we'll move into recovery, which will include rebuilding infrastructure and supporting communities. It's going to be quite some time. And that's what FEMA does. We'll be with these communities for the long haul to make sure they can respond appropriately and then recover.
Well, you don't need me to tell you. You know it like the back of your hand. Florida has thousands and thousands of uninsured homeowners, about 1 in every 6. So what can FEMA do to help those folks on the backside of the storm?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that our program is designed to do. We know insurance is the best way to protect yourself from the damages from a storm. We encourage everyone that's able to get insurance, if you have insurance, to file a claim. But many of our programs are designed for those uninsured losses and making sure that those that don't have insurance, that may not get full coverage, still can get what they need to get their home to be in a habitable condition, get some initial assistance so that everybody can recover. And so there's a range of programs across the federal government that FEMA provides and some of our partners to help everybody, regardless of what situation they're in.
Keith, it's going to be a long night, but thank you for the work you do. Keith Turi, who was at FEMA headquarters. Hurricane Helene is of course, bearing down on Florida as we speak. The storm expected to bring intense and damaging winds to homes and properties across the state. While no one ever wants to have to use their homeowner's insurance, the most concerning trend in Florida right now is simply not being able to get coverage in the first place. NBC's Yasmin Vasugian is following that angle for us. Yasmin, how bad is the insurance situation right now for the folks living in Florida who see hurricane after hurricane year after year?
You mentioned that stat, Tom, and I'm glad that you ended on that question with the FEMA administrator there, because it's 1 in 6, right? 18% of Floridians don't have insurance, and it's because it's cost prohibitive, right? This hurricane barreling towards folks in Florida, and they're thinking, okay, how am I going to prepare? And then how am I going to recover if, in fact, by the way, I have insurance? And if I don't have insurance, of course, I'm going to look to FEMA, to the emergency help to make sure I can recover some of what I have lost. But in the meantime, I mean, some of these numbers, Tom, they're pretty startling, right? 18%, as I mentioned, 1 in 3 are lacking insurance in Miami-Dade County. Think about that. 1 in 3, 34%. And then you've got 20%, as I talk about cost prohibitive, right? 20% of Florida homeowners paying $4,000 a year in insurance. That is the largest share, Tom, in the entire country. And some are paying upwards of $10,000 a year for their home insurance. So you wonder, okay, why is it so many of these individuals that are in this kind of path of hurricanes that often hit the Florida region, why don't they have insurance? Because it is, in fact, cost prohibitive. How does it become so cost prohibitive? As you mentioned, right, people don't want to file those claims. The second you file a claim, the more expensive it comes. And how often are these people filing these claims? A lot more often. Why? Because we have more storms, because we have more destructive storms, because we have climate change. So it's this really terrible cycle that you have a lot of folks that are in the path of these really intense hurricanes. They're finding themselves in without a way out, worried about the fact that they're going to lose their entire house. And then they have to deal with FEMA, which, of course, has been incredibly helpful through many of these processes. But there's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of bureaucracy. And it's complicated to deal with in recovering possibly the contents or your entire home, maybe.
Yeah, and a lot of these insurance companies have pulled out of Florida because of the cost of doing business there. They've decided they're not going to do it anymore. And there, of course, are a lot of folks who do have insurance.
They do.
But getting companies to pay out so you can repair your home, that can take a long time, and it's frustrating, it's stressful, right? So how do people navigate that process?
So you kind of got to have a checklist when you're preparing for these things. And, of course, it is so stressful already to prepare for these types of hurricanes, everything from obviously the food, the water, getting to safety, making sure you and your family are safe. And that is obviously always first and foremost the most important thing. But when you're preparing for possible home loss, possible loss of things inside your home, they're recommending you make a list. And then you have an electronic copy of everything that is on that insurance policy, right? Because don't assume that everything is covered inside your home. So make sure you know what is covered inside your home, and you make a list of those things, and you have an electronic copy as well if, in fact, you obviously lose a written out list. You also want to make sure that you take photos of everything that is covered inside of your home. And then afterwards, after the storm hits, right, you're going to have to survey the damage. How many times have I been in these storm areas in the aftermath of so many of these hurricanes, tornadoes as well, in which folks are really just surveying the damage. They're encouraged to take photos of every single thing that is damaged inside that home. And by the way, not to start fixing it immediately if, in fact, you have that insurance policy, because there's folks from those insurance companies that need to come and assess your property before they're able to write you a check so you can then start fixing your home. And what happens so many times for these individuals is these storms just keep coming, right? In this area in particular, you have homes that are still not fixed from the last storm and are now going to have to deal with the damages from this storm. As the FEMA administrator mentioned, notifying your insurance company of any damages immediately. Do not attempt, again, I cannot reiterate this enough, to fix those more kind of significant, permanent damages, especially when it comes to the safety of all of it. Save all your receipts. Beware of scammers. There are a lot of kind of quote unquote ambulance chasers out there that are trying to take advantage of folks that are vulnerable in these situations because they are so emotional about having lost their home or the contents of their home. So kind of have your wits about you when you're dealing with stuff like this. But certainly,
hey, Yasmin, drill down on that. I just heard the Florida Insurance Commissioner a short time ago issuing a warning about that very issue. Beware of scammers. Who is the scammer? What would the scam be? Make it quick, but this is an important bullet point.
I mean, it's folks that will approach you at your home, while you're standing outside your home, while you're surveying your damage. Can I help you? How can I help you? I have this type of company. We can help you. Also, folks that are willing to help rebuild your home, right? Again, you have to get the insurance company that you have involved in the process. You do not want to get ahead of the process because you could then say, okay, let me write you a check for $5,000, right? You're going to rebuild, for instance, my, front area of my home. But then you're not going to necessarily get that money back from the insurance company that you already have because you have already fixed that area, right? But these are people that are just trying to make money off of your immediate loss, knowing that you're vulnerable in that moment, and you just want to get your life back to normal, right? So take your time, be patient, have a plan, and, God willing, it's going to work out.
It's really great advice and an important warning. Yasmin, thank you very much for all of that. Good info. When we come back, you're looking at a very shaky shot, I should say, out of Florida on the left there. That's the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. And on your right there is the Matalache, bridge in Lee County. And we're going to get a reporter report from north in Perry, plus what the rest of the Hurricane Helene path looks like. So we're coming right back. Continuing live coverage here of Hurricane Helene on NBC News Now. We are tracking the storm as it barrels towards northwest Florida. We want to bring in meteorologist Bill Karins for another check on the path of the storm. Bill, it looks like right now, that's a guesstimate on my part, 200 miles west of Tampa, more or less? And we're told that's as close as it will get to Tampa?
Yeah, this is as closest approach it'll be to Tampa. And, from the pictures and just from, the people on the ground there, it feels like a storm is nearby now. It feels like a hurricane is just off the coast. Obviously, you can see clearly the eye here. And you can also see all the lightning strikes with the eye, too. And the winds are really picking up. In just the last hour, we went from about 100,000 people without power to now 250,000 people without power in Florida. And that's not from the direct, hurricane core. That's just from these outer feeder bands, especially on the west coast here. So let's give you a little close. Actually, I measured this out for you, Tom. Tampa to the center of the eye, 115 miles. So Tampa did not miss this major hurricane by much. It's considered probably a glancing blow from the rain and the wind. Not so much with the storm surge, though. You are close enough that surge is really going to move in impressively later on this evening. I'll talk more about that in a second. But the storm is heading up in this general direction here, the Big Bend in between Tallahassee and Perry. It's 145 miles away. It's moving roughly 25 miles per hour. So we're about 5 to 6 hours away from that landfall. So the important thing is this is the eye of the storm. It's about 36 miles across. The most extreme wind damage will be in this portion of the eye, the northeast quadrant. This is where the winds are almost always the strongest when it moves onshore. And we know it's heading up somewhere between Tallahassee and Perry. The distance between those is 45 miles. So, Tom, it's not set in stone that we're going to get crushed in Tallahassee and in Perry. Likely one of the two locations will go through the worst part of the eye. And right now, it favors Perry, Florida, unfortunately, who's just been a magnet for big storms over the last couple of years.
Hey, Bill, stand by. We're going to the governor, Ron DeSantis, speaking right now and telling people to prepare.
Whether it's a friend, a family member, I know some of the counties say you can check in with them and give them that information if you're comfortable doing that. But please do that if you decided to hunker down. Once we start to get the real nasty conditions, don't at that point go on the roadways. That is very hazardous. That does produce fatalities when people do that in the middle of the storm. If you are sheltering at home, be cognizant of what trees are around you. You have 125 mile an hour maximum sustained right now. Probably is going to be higher. Whether it hits as a Category 4 or Category 3, it's going to be a significant storm. And even as it moves inland throughout northern Florida, you are going to see trees that are going to be falling down. That's just the reality of what we're doing, of what we're seeing here. And if you hear the tree limbs snapping around you, sometimes it almost sounds like fireworks are going off. Treat that as a tornado shelter in a part of the home that would be where you'd have protection from that. And this is the type of thing where, especially as that eye wall moves through, you're going to have some serious storms. And there also may be tornadoes that will be spun off from this as well, and that could be producing some of these reactions. If you have really severe weather, and then all of a sudden it gets very calm, that probably means you're in the eye of the storm. So don't go out into that. That eye wall will collapse quickly and unexpectedly, and you will get very bad weather very quickly as well. There's going to be power lines that are going to be down. Be careful about that, particularly in the streets, particularly near your residence. Do not mess with down power lines. Those can be very, very hazardous. The storm is going to hit Florida's Big Bend region sometime this evening, likely around 11 o'clock. It's going to be dark. Don't go out as soon as that storm passes, if it's still dark, and try to do work around your house or worry about things. Let it get light. There's going to be hazards there. It's just not something you want to be navigating in the dark. When we get into tomorrow, you may have some things on your roof. Just be careful with using ladders. There's going to be groups that are going to be helping people fix their homes in the appropriate areas. So if you're somebody that you may have some physical limitations, don't put your health at risk for that. Watch the standing water. We've already seen a lot of standing water in different parts of the state already. We're likely to see more of that. You never know what's in the standing water. When you have streets that are flooded, don't try to drive through the flooded streets. You are going to end up having your car stall out, and then you're going to be stuck, not to mention the hazards of just being on the roads in those circumstances with having accidents. We've been working here at the state, really starting the weekend. Clearly, we did a state of emergency at the beginning of the week. We have 1,100 missions in progress through the Florida Division of Emergency Management. Those continue to be filled, and they will continue to be filled until they're all done. Many of those are more for post-storm resources rather than pre-landfall resources. We do have the linemen staged throughout the state. You have Duke, TECO, FPL. We have the co-ops, we have the municipals. I think everybody's on the same page. As soon as this storm passes, there needs to be a strong effort to get the power restored, and they will be working to do that. And they've done a great job on this in recent years, and I think we've really set the standard here in the state of Florida. We have 130 generators that are at various gas stations. So when they lose power, most of the newer gas stations or the larger stations have generators per Florida law or have an ability to get the power back on. Some of the smaller ones don't. And when you're talking about the Big Bend region, that can be significant. So those generators have been distributed, and we should not see major interruptions in fuel given that. We have all state agencies that are on standby, 3,500 National Guard soldiers. We can surge that very quickly if we need more. Florida Highway Patrol has 200 state troopers that are on standby. They will go and be dispatched immediately following the storm to areas that need help. Florida Department of Transportation standing by, 307 cut and toss crews to get the roads cleared, 120 bridge inspectors to get the bridges back open, almost 700 generators, big 200 plus pieces of large equipment, and then the large pumps, which they have used not just in hurricanes, but in some of the rainstorms we've had where you've seen flooding in recent months. FDOT has used that, and it's been very effective. We have done a fuel mission, even though we've sent the generators to the stations. We haven't necessarily seen fuel shortage, but you do have ports that are closed. So we have almost 500,000 gallons of diesel in reserve that are being brought into the state, 132,000 gallons of regular motor vehicle gas, 36,000 gallons of propane, and 5,000 gallons of jet fuel. So you're close to almost 700,000 gallons between everything we have across the variety of fuel needs. And we don't anticipate having to use all or even most of that, but we want to make sure that people have the fuel that they need, particularly as the storm passes. So if you're in one of these areas in the northern part of the state, particularly on the coast and those low-lying areas that will face the brunt of the storm surge, you still have time, but you got to do it right now. Every minute that goes by, you're going to start to see conditions worsen. You know, I was out, you look this afternoon in Tallahassee, it was honestly wasn't that bad. It's going to get a lot worse in northern Florida as that storm gets closer. So I want to thank everybody that's been involved in the prep. We've got the assets that are there. People just need to make sure they're making decisions that have themselves and their families' safety in mind. We can't control how strong this hurricane's going to get. We can't control the track of the hurricane, but what you can control is what you can do to put yourself in the best chance to be able to ride this out in a way that's going to be safe. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kevin Guthrie.
Thank you, Governor, again for your unwavering support and commitment to the safety and well-being of Floridians. We really appreciate it. As the governor said, we continue to work on more than 1,100 missions, and we continue to fill those. Again, as he said, most of them at this point are going to be post-impact resources that are ready to move into the area immediately. Life-threatening storm surge is expected along Florida's West Gulf Coast and Big Bend. Floodwaters are hard to navigate during the day, but even harder to see at night. At this point, it is the last hours to safely evacuate ahead of Hurricane Helene from the Gulf Coast and Big Bend. If you have not already left, you're probably going to need to start looking at sheltering in place. Stay inside, stay safe, stay put. Do not attempt to leave your home or drive during the storm. The governor has mentioned this. It's going to be dark outside. When it starts to make landfall, the street lights, the minimal street lights that we do have in the Big Bend area are going to go out. It is going to be very dark. So please do not drive, do not go out, wait to daylight, and then only drive if you need to.
All right, well, let's recap quickly from the governor's news conference. Again, reiterating that the storm is expected to hit the Big Bend area of Florida at about 11 p.m. tonight, which means, of course, it'll be dark. They've already got power outages across portions of that region, so that's going to be a complication. The governor announcing they've got 3,500 National Guard troops, 200 state troopers, and 207 highway and road teams already standing by to respond. And they are making it very clear that this is coming in fast. And therefore, if people have not left for the safety of a local shelter or to get out of the storm zone, they need to hunker down and be very, very mindful of the threat that is incoming. So you are looking there at live pictures out of Tampa, the Sunshine Skyway Bridge on the right. South of that, it looks like, I believe we're looking at Lee County, Florida, south of Sarasota on the upper left. No, I'm told that is Tampa as well, Tampa Bay. So at the moment, the storm, which is moving to the northwest, is probably as close to Tampa as it's going to get. It'll be at about 110 miles per hour, we're told, when it hits Tallahassee. Let's go to NBC's Christine Romans, who is also looking at how all of this is going to impact our pocketbooks, and specifically the price of gas and any impact on the oil and gas infrastructure there in the South. Christine?
So, you know, those big oil platforms and drills in the Gulf of Mexico, they are right there when these storms come through, and they are professionals at being able to shut these things down and really button everything up before these storms come through. So they have some natural gas and oil production is offline from those platforms, but I'm told by oil industry experts they don't think production will be stopped for very long. In fact, AAA is saying that there'll be a pause in gas prices here. They're using the word pause, but overall, the path of lower gas prices still seems to be what they're calling for here. So that's the interesting part of this. But I think when you talk about what a widespread area this is and what it means in terms of halting demand for gas, there's probably run on gas stations at the moment, but overall, people are going to be hunkered down for a few days here. So at some point, this will be a demand story.
I thought it was interesting, you know, you and I have both covered a lot of hurricanes. Interesting that under Florida law now, new where gas stations must have generators so that people can still get gas if they lose power.
And you heard the governor there talk about 700,000 gallons of different kinds of diesel and propane and gasoline and jet fuel. I mean, they're bringing stuff in to make sure that they've got it if there are any kinds of shortages. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I remember in both Superstorm Sandy and Hurricane Irene and a whole bunch of other things on the East Coast where we didn't have, we had the gas. You couldn't pump it. So these gas stations had real problems. And that is something that is a lesson, I think, that has been learned in Florida's case for sure.
It's the Colonial Pipeline, right, Christine, that runs up the East Coast from the Gulf region, and that's critical to supplying gas to everything from the south to the Mid-Atlantic, I think all the way up to New York and New Jersey.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, no, this is a very national infrastructure, quite frankly, and it's a global oil market. But the path of gas prices has been lower. I mean, you've got gas prices down 13 cents from a month ago and down 61 cents from a year ago. And you've got crude oil prices actually going down because of some reports and some guessing about, some OPEC machinations and diplomacy there. So there's a lot of other stuff going on here. In terms of the inconvenience and the potential loss of life, that is the big story for Florida and this region and this whole Southeast, quite frankly, here. And I think another big part of the story, Tom, is going to be power outages. I mean, you've got experts saying you could, in some of these rural wooded areas of the Southeast, you could have power outages for days, if not weeks. And they've got lots of linemen already in there already. So the energy story, I think, is more about power than it will be about gas prices.
Yeah, I traded emails as well with an oil and gas analyst who said that's exactly the situation, the ability to move the gas through the pipes, but they don't expect that any particular refinery is in danger. Christine, thank you. Christine Romans, who's on top of every business and economic angle here. We're going to resume our NBC News coverage live here on NBC News Now as we hit the top of the hour, and we're watching Hurricane Helene as it starts to move very quickly through the Gulf of Mexico, taking aim at Tallahassee. We're going to reset right now for viewers who are just now joining us. Hurricane Helene is, in fact, a Category 3 storm, likely to become an extremely dangerous Cat 4 hurricane by the time it comes ashore between 8 and 11 p.m. Live pictures right there of Helene's impact on the Tampa region. On the left, you've got the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, and then you've got another shot on the right there of Tampa Bay. This is a big one. We're talking winds of 120 miles per hour, and in some of the spots expected to get hit the hardest, the National Hurricane Center is warning that the storm surge could hit 20 feet, potentially creating, and quoting here, an unsurvivable scenario. Urban search and rescue teams are already staging in the region. Take a look at where it is headed, and right now, as we mentioned, a Category 3 with the potential to get all the way up to a Cat 4 by the time it hits. And they're now thinking 11 p.m. right there as it takes aim at the Big Bend region. In the cities you see on the map there, everybody is very much on alert. Over 1,000 flights in and out of the region have already been canceled. More than 240,000 people are already without power, with crews already up since early this morning fixing power lines just south of Tallahassee. We've heard from the governor that utility teams are already standing by to pick up the pieces as this thing continues to move. Up in space, NASA is giving us this bird's eye view of Helene from the space station. Now, we've got our team posted all up and across the entire Gulf Coast tonight. NBC's Bill Karins has our forecast. Bill, let's get back to it real quickly. Talk us through what we can expect over the coming hours. Again, we're looking at this is what, as close as it's going to get, or the feeder bands will get to Tampa right now, right?
Yeah, and this is where the destruction begins. This is when the trees start going down. Power outages are growing quickly, especially on the west side of Florida. And let's talk about this. This storm is so huge that we just had a wind gust over 70 miles per hour in the Miami area. Miami, that's 320 miles away from the center of this storm. The other thing that I don't like is that the storm eye is getting smaller. It's shrinking on itself. It's strengthening. You can actually see the bright colors around the thunderstorms.
Why don't you like to see that, Bill? What does that mean? Why does that concern you?
Because the winds are going to go up. the pressure drops, the storm gets stronger, and that means we got more destruction for people. I want this thing as weak as possible, Tom. I don't want this thing to increase up to a Category strong 4, God forbid a 5 before a landfall. I mean, we're only about 5 hours away, and the Hurricane Hunter aircraft is in the center of this. It's actually in the eye right now. It just measured a pressure of about 946, and that doesn't mean anything to a lot of people, but the last update was about 950 something, so it's dropping. The lower it gets, the stronger the storm, and the stronger the storm, the stronger the winds, and the more damage that'll be done, and the more storm surge, the higher the water levels will be. So that's the center of the storm, and things are going to quickly go downhill. I know it hasn't been that bad yet. Panama City, towards Tallahassee, Apalachicola, it's just kind of breezy. I don't know, no big deal. But look to the south here. Bradenton just went over 70. Sarasota has got a gust to 67, and this isn't even close. This is 120 miles away from the center of the storm. You're gusting to a strong tropical storm, and that's why we're losing power here on the Florida West Coast. And the other thing right now is low tide. And with these winds now shifting as the storm goes north of you, that water starting to pile up on the coast. The storm surge is coming in at low tide. And now, because the storm's going north, that wind, you can see the little arrows here, is going to continue to pile up for the next 6 hours. So as that next high tide approaches, we're going to get that peak storm surge. We already have a 4-foot storm surge on the west coast of Florida, and we have to add another 2 feet to that for the high tide. Plus, the water is going to build up even higher. So that's how we're going to get up to 8 to 10 feet in some cases in areas far from the center, even in Tampa Bay. That's why they're predicting a record amount of water in the bay. So here's the latest from the Hurricane Center. Winds 120 max. It's moving northeast at about 21 miles per hour. So that's fast. And as we go towards about maybe 10 to midnight now is where I'm estimating we get that landfall. This is the 10 p.m. position from the Hurricane Center, about 20 miles just south of the coast. So they're saying right around 11 p.m. And the all-important thing is who's going to go through the eye. That's where the devastating winds will be, 120-mile-per-hour gusts, trees, houses destroyed. Is that going to be towards Tallahassee, towards Perry? Is it going to split the middle here? How close will Valdosta get to the eye as we go throughout about midnight to about 2 a.m.? Those are all the questions that we're going to have to watch closely. And then tomorrow, the storm heads up through Georgia. It's still going to be a tropical storm tomorrow morning at sunrise near Atlanta. That's how fast this thing is moving. Obviously, we talked, all day long about, where we're going to see a possible 20-foot storm surge. But this is the map we're going to watch. This is a map showing what the actual surge is now. Currently, the wind is blowing offshore. It's blowing out north of the storm. That's why Cedar Key's at 1 foot, Apalachicola is at 2. We're going to keep an eye here on Old Port and Tampa. Right now, the surge is only about 2 feet. About 4 hours from now, this could be up there close to 6 to 8 feet. And that's the water above normal water height. So that's over seawalls. That's going to be into homes, businesses, anywhere right there near the bay. Here's a closer view of this. And St. Petersburg now at 2.4 feet. Clearwater Beach is now up to 3 feet. These numbers, if you follow us and stay with us throughout the evening, are just going to continue to grow as that surge begins to move in along with that high tide. And, of course, the rainfall is a huge story. We may lose more lives from this storm up in the mountains of North Georgia, Asheville, and South Carolina than we do at the actual landfall. We've already had 10 inches of rain in Asheville. That's a 1,000-year flood. Has already happened, Tom, before the storm has even gotten there. And now when we get the storm itself later tonight and all the rain in addition, there's nowhere for that water to go. I mean, we're going to have
That's astonishing.
Yeah, we're going to have catastrophic flooding throughout this region. I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, when this is all said and done, that may be a bigger deal than the wind damage that we get in Tallahassee and Perry. And we'll have to wait and see what that storm surge does, too. There's so many aspects to this. I didn't even mention we have like 5 or 6 tornado warnings that are active right now from this storm, too. So there's always that fear, and that's through the entire southeast. That goes from about Myrtle Beach southwards all the way down to Miami. And, yeah, so many elements to this storm. When you get storms this big, Tom, there's just multiple problems, just one after another with a storm like this.
Plus the threat of downed power lines and downed trees. I mean, they're talking about 1,000 trees coming down in Tallahassee. Hey, Bill, looking at the photo or the video we have right now, this is live. So you're looking at the Matlacha Bridge, which, as I understand it, is Lee County, south of Sarasota. And then the other shot we had was actually from the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. If you're telling me right now that we're at low tide, is that right? You're seeing already that impact there on the Matlacha Bridge, which is pretty far south of Tampa. But there's the Tampa Bridge, the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. What, if anything, is the Matlacha Bridge going to look like? Granted, this thing is moving to the north, but what might it look like if we get closer to high tide?
So, right, we're at low tide, and the tides on the west coast of Florida, they only change. It's not like the east coast of the United States. They only change by about 2 feet. So, if we were at high tide right now instead, we would add 2 feet to that picture there on the right. Now, that surge is still coming up. And the storm, because it's going due north, kind of paralleling the west coast of Florida, the winds are going to remain out of the south. So that's still going to pile the water up even higher. So I bet, max, we're already at 4-foot surge where we're looking there. We're going to add 2 feet to that for high tide. I'd add another foot or 2 to the surge on that. So I'd say maybe 4 feet higher, 3 to 4 feet higher than what you're seeing right now would probably be the max water level there at the Matalacha Bridge.
And look at the winds that are moving that camera around on the bridge that extends from the south side of Tampa then over the bay. That's a lot of wind. The mayor said 30 minutes ago it was 50 miles per hour. It's probably stronger now, right?
Yeah, Bradenton just had a gust of 70 miles per hour. So, yeah, once we start getting over 50 is when we start getting power outages. And that's why we're now getting over 300,000. So it's growing quickly.
And that bridge pretty much dumps you right into Bradenton or very close to it. All right, Bill, thank you very much. The FEMA chief says Tallahassee will take a dead-on hit from the storm, possibly the most powerful storm to hit that city in its history. We go now to NBC's Kathy Park, who is in Tallahassee for us. And Kathy, Tallahassee, away from the coast, will have just a bit more time to prepare for a direct hit. But the warning from the governor, who's in Tallahassee, was prepare, and this is going to be a pretty significant blast.
Tom, that's absolutely right. I mean, right now we are starting to feel the outer bands of Hurricane Helene right now. So the rain is starting to move in, but this is just kind of a preview of what's to come. You mentioned the impact that this will have on the trees in this area. 55% of the city is under some sort of tree canopy. So you can only imagine what could potentially happen when you have 100-mile-per-hour wind gusts move through this area and stay put for an extended period of time. That's why the mayor, emergency officials are so concerned about the volume of trees that may come down, the power lines that may come down, as well as the prolonged power outages after the fact. Earlier today, we had a chance to speak with some residents at an emergency shelter, and they were telling me they have lived through several storms, living in Florida and in Tallahassee, but nothing of this magnitude. What worries them the most is the fact that this is a Category 3, potentially a Cat 4, when it makes landfall, and the anxiety, you could kind of feel it building, and they felt better leaving their homes and finding refuge in this emergency shelter, which was in fact just a high school. So all these people were placed in the auditorium, and they are told they cannot leave during the height of the storm for good reason, and they're very strict about that because they want to keep everyone safe. They are offering food, water, and obviously they can, go to the bathroom. So they have all those amenities, and the power will be on because they have a generator in place as well. But Tom, driving around Tallahassee, not a lot of cars on the roadway, so it seems like people are heeding the warnings. A lot of people decided to leave. We're right by a lot of the hotels in downtown Tallahassee right now. They're sold out. So a lot of folks are hunkering in place in structures like hotels, which have backup generators, and that's where we are planted to kind of ride out the storm as well. But the mayor, when we were speaking with him over the past 24 hours, really the big concern for him is wind damage. Not so much the storm surge because we're a bit farther inland, but of course all the trees that could be toppled. But he is leaning on resources coming in from all over the country. He's saying that crews have positioned themselves from 9 different states, so they are looking ahead and possibly a big recovery effort come Friday morning. Tom?
Well, we're going to be watching it closely, and we certainly wish everybody there well. Kathy, thank you. Let's bring in now Kevin Peters. He's the Emergency Management Director for Leon County, Florida. That's where Tallahassee is. The town expected to take a direct hit. Kevin, what's your biggest concern as you head into the evening? The governor just said maybe 11 p.m. is when he expects it to actually hit the Big Bend area.
Yeah, so obviously, like a lot of places in Florida, we are getting ready for this impact and everything we expect. We've heard a lot of this already in the broadcast. It's going to be trees coming down from the high winds. It's power lines getting wrapped in trees as these high winds come through. Additionally, it's going to be the heavy rainfall. We have a flood watch in effect, and we've had rain all day in Tallahassee. So we have multiple hazards that we're really concerned about, but we've been preparing all week long. We've been tracking the storm since last week. We have our crews ready and staged, and once the storm winds pass overnight tonight, we'll be ready to get out and start our response very early in the morning.
You know, the governor was saying 3,500 National Guard members are positioned across the state or on standby, 200 state troopers, 307 highway and road crews, and then utility teams, of course, from not only Florida utilities, but other regional utility players coming in. You guys have learned your lesson over the years, right? This is not your first rodeo or hurricane, as the case may be.
Yeah, and even this year, this isn't even our first experience with hazardous weather. We've had some significant flooding in April. We had 3 tornadoes simultaneously on May 10th streak across our community. So it's been a very busy year for us. We've had a lot of opportunity to put our plans to the test. We have a lot of opportunity to work with these type of partners through mutual aid. So we're an experienced community, and we are ready for this response.
Kevin, you talked about trees coming down with the estimate that you could lose 1,000 trees in Tallahassee alone. And remember, those trees fall on homes, right? And they fall on cars and they fall on people. I mean, that is a real dangerous scenario.
Yeah, we've communicated a lot with the citizens of Leon County and Tallahassee. We've encouraged preparedness. We have a mandatory evacuation for mobile homes and manufactured homes in this community. We issued that yesterday, encouraged individuals that lived in those structures to complete their evacuation plans by 8 a.m. this morning. We've seen a lot of people come to our shelters, where our census is around 1,000 people in shelter now. So we believe people are taking this serious because of those types of risks, because of the trees that could come down on their homes. We feel like people are following the directions that we've been giving, and they are taking this serious.
Kevin, thank you. We certainly wish you well. The eyes of the country are watching and hoping you have a good evening, and things hopefully will not be the worst case scenario. Kevin, thank you. There also, as we're watching this, the storm isn't just hitting Florida. Our climate team expects Helene to remain at hurricane strength well over the next 12 hours as it moves right across that border north of Kevin into Georgia. NBC's Priya Sridhar is in Atlanta for us right now. And Priya, the big concern in Atlanta seems to be flooding with the potential for double-digit rainfall. When is the worst expected to hit Atlanta?
So one interesting thing, Tom, as you can probably see, it's already raining here, and it's been raining for about the last 24 hours. This is from a completely unrelated weather system, so it's only going to get worse when we actually start to feel the impacts of Helene, which is scheduled for later this evening. The ground is already saturated, and we're expecting anywhere from 6 to 12 inches of rain just in the Atlanta metro area alone. And if you go up into the northeastern part of Georgia, they could get anywhere from 16 to 18 inches of rain, actually. So flash flooding is a huge concern, but we're also worried about tornadoes here, because just as we heard from Kathy, our friends down in Florida, we're still going to be seeing some pretty strong hurricane force winds, up to 60-mile-per-hour winds that could have potential to even turn into tornadoes here. Another thing we're worried about here in Atlanta, and it's kind of shocking that I'm even saying this, is landslides, and that's because of the combination of those really strong hurricane force winds plus all of the rainfall that we're expecting, Tom. So in anticipation of all of that, the Atlanta metro area schools have basically shut down for the next 2 days. Most of the offices across the city have already closed down for non-essential workers, and the city is really bracing for Helene's impact to hit us very soon.
Just for the viewers, I want to make sure the viewer knows you're looking on the left-hand side of the screen. That's Tampa. That's getting hit pretty hard by the rain right now. But we're talking to Priya, who's up in Atlanta, because ultimately that's where the storm will hit. What do they think? What time are we thinking here? I mean, are the early morning hours? And then separately, the biggest airport in the world, or the busiest airport in the world, is right there in Atlanta, right? What are they doing?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're hearing that the worst of it is going to be coming to us in the very late night hours into the early morning. And we're expecting it to basically be over us for into Friday evening. As you mentioned, Atlanta is the world's busiest airport. There were about 90,000 people expected to travel in and out of Hartsfield-Jackson today. The airport did post on Twitter that people should expect to get to the airport early. They were dealing with some cancellations. The last time I checked, it was about 200, so it wasn't so significant just yet, but of course we're going to continue to monitor that. And Governor Kemp has issued a state of emergency here in the state of Georgia that applies to basically all the counties. They're mobilizing the Georgia Guardsmen here to get ready to basically clear debris and also have swift water rescue teams ready for anyone who might get stranded in these conditions, Tom.
And can I just make a note covering the airlines and aviation? When it starts raining heavily in Atlanta, that's going to impact flight operations all over the country, right? Flights get delayed, they get canceled, and then there's the ripple effect across the entire country. So we're going to see that effect, I think, play out for the next 24, 48 hours. Priya, thank you. By the way, you might want to step closer to the camera. You're going to get swamped by that by the car spray there any second now. Thank you very much. Let's go back to Florida, where Governor Ron DeSantis just finished speaking, saying that Florida is Hurricane Helene ready now more than ever. As you know, Helene set to make landfall in the next few hours. First responders, firefighters, the National Guard, police, all are standing by, preparing for this potentially catastrophic storm all across Florida's Gulf Coast. He says that there is still time for people to get to their designated shelters. Right now, more than 200,000 people have no power in the state. Let's go to NBC's Marissa Parra. She's in Tampa, and we've got the split screen with Marissa and the water that's and the wind that's moving in. Hi, Marissa. How you doing?
Good. It's a little hard to hear you. You can tell there's a lot going on here. By the way, I just want to point this out. This is something you should not be doing. You do not know what is in that water. That's an example of what not to do. That is not safe at all. So we want to point out this has quickly risen. We're going to stop right here for the sake of safety because we're going to practice what we preach here. But you can see the water breaching the wall over there. Now, that is Bayshore Boulevard. Tom, you and I both know this is prone to flooding. Obviously, an area, a zone that is under mandatory evacuation for exactly this reason, that stop sign.
This has changed dramatically.
Go ahead, Tom.
In the last 30 minutes, Marissa, this has changed dramatically where you are.
Well, Tom, I will point out we did move locations. We are not in the same location we were in half an hour ago or so when I last saw you. But I can tell you that since we've been here over the last 10 minutes, it has changed dramatically. We were standing further down. The water level has risen. You can look at that stop sign to kind of get a sense of how high the water is. And again, another example of what authorities ask you not to do. You don't know what's in this water. There could be sewage water. There could be sewage in here. There could be nails. There could be, we've already seen several different types of fish swimming around in here. And furthermore, you never know if there's a downed power line. We've talked about these wind gusts that can knock over power lines. You never know what's at the bottom. So please do not do that. When we talk about precautions that have been taken, there are several bridges. You and I talked about this about an hour ago, Tom. Bridges that connect Pinellas County with the surrounding areas. Pinellas County, of course, is that peninsula to the west of us because we're in Tampa. Pinellas encompasses St. Augustine. It is flanked by the Gulf of Mexico and the Bay. And we heard from the Pinellas County Sheriff today, Tom, early this morning. He was frustrated. He said it is a real problem that people are not heeding evacuation orders, essentially saying, if you play stupid games, you will win stupid prizes. He said, we will not come and get you if you haven't evacuated in the time that we have given. And he said, at a certain point, we're not going to come and rescue you. His advice was to climb on top of furniture if you have to, if your home is flooded. Tom, I just want to point out a couple of other things. If someone's listening and they have an electric vehicle, make sure it is not in an area where it can get exposed to salt water. That is a fire hazard. And if your home is prone to flooding, make sure the main breaker is off, make sure the gas is shut off. That is also a massive fire hazard. So, Tom, we are, again, already seeing this water level rising rapidly, a big risk, and we ask people to please be careful and please be safe. Do not walk through this water because you don't know what you are stepping through and what you may be stepping on, Tom.
That's such a good point. Marissa, yesterday we were talking to you as the nearby hospital was preparing, and they're at a rather low level. They're not the only hospital at a low level, right? I'm aware that Johns Hopkins Children's Hospital is also at a low level in nearby St. Pete.
Yes, and we know that the Tampa General Hospital has that aqua fence, this barrier, and it's a piece of technology that they have installed. It sort of seals it off. It protects them from upwards of 15 feet of storm surge, and that is important because they are the only level 1 trauma center in this region, Tom.
Yeah, 41,000 people there, I understand. Just in Hillsborough County have already experienced some loss of power, right? So utility crews standing by, but I'm assuming they're not going to respond to put the power back on right now when the storm is hitting.
Not when the wind gusts are like they are, Tom.
Yeah.
I mean, we are just getting started here. I would say in the last hour, we have felt these wind gusts kind of jostling us around. Remember, we're nowhere near where that eye wall is supposed to hit, but it is still significant enough that, you know, we're being mindful of where these trees are. This is something everyone should be paying attention to. Stop signs. There's a lot that could happen with these wind gusts. It doesn't take much, especially if one of these trees or stop signs is unstable. You don't want to be in the path when it's flying around, of course.
You know, I've been on that bridge in the bottom left-hand when it was high winds, but nothing like this. I wouldn't, and you can see it's closed, and they don't want anybody on the bridge right now. Marissa, thank you very much. Back to Georgia right now in the southern part of that state. Tornadoes are a big concern, with the governor saying the storm could really start making an impact around sunset. NBC's Priscilla Thompson is in Valdosta. And I'm sorry, Priscilla, as I come to you, we now have got breaking news. This storm has now been upgraded from a Cat 3 to a Cat 4. Again, you're looking at live pictures out of the Tampa area. Let's go back to Priscilla Thompson, though. Priscilla, Georgia's governor, I mean to say, says that the storm won't just be dangerous, it could be deadly and very costly as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. The governor has said that he expects all 159 counties in this state to be impacted. We're talking about hurricane-force winds, which can topple trees and cause a lot of damage, as you know. But we're also talking about that possibility of tornadoes that you mentioned. And the sun is setting. We're starting to feel the wind pick up ever so slightly, and it is only going to get more intense from here. But the governor also said that they are bracing for the possibility of landslides, and that is not something that we talk about often here in Georgia. And so, yes, those damages, if those things happen, could be very significant. And I will tell you that officials in this county have warned residents that the damages may not qualify for FEMA assistance, which means that it is going to be on the state and local government and, of course, residents, if that happens, to potentially figure out how to recover and rebuild when this is all over. Tom?
Okay, how soon?
How soon are we expecting things to start kicking up here?
No, I'm sorry, Priscilla. My apologies. I was just told we're going to go to Bill Karins, and I was asking how soon are we going to Bill. My apologies to you. But nonetheless, as your situation there is starting to continue to develop, you're talking about the worst of that storm hitting your area there in Valdosta at about what time?
Yeah, so that should be happening going into the night as it moves through Florida. It's going to be a very quick moving storm. And so folks here have been preparing, and they're preparing to hunker down. You see businesses have the sandbags out here. A lot of these businesses in this downtown area closed early in order to prepare for that. And we just got a note from the county that this storm has shifted east, and they expect the whole county to take a direct hit from this hurricane. So they are telling residents, if your home is boarded up and you're concerned because you're living in perhaps a mobile home or something that might not be as stable, there are 4 shelters open, and to get to the shelters before this rain starts coming down. Tom?
All right. Thank you, Priscilla, in Valdosta, Georgia. Let me just read what we've just been handed, and this is from the National Hurricane Center. It says the following: it is a dangerous Category 4 hurricane now. A NOAA Hurricane Hunter aircraft currently investigating Helene has recently found that the maximum sustained winds have now increased to 130 miles per hour. The minimum central pressure has decreased to 947 millibars based on the drop sonda data. And as you know, as Bill said to us a short time ago, he does not want to see that drop because that suggests that the storm will only intensify. We're going to get to Bill in just a second, so stand by for that. He's getting all of this data from the National Hurricane Center as well. Let's take a look at North Carolina. It is worried about potentially historic flash flooding in the mountainous area that really usually doesn't see this kind of intense weather activity. In one county, they're expecting water levels to hit record levels set more than a century ago. NBC's George Solis is right now near Asheville in North Carolina. George, I was noticing here, one note here is that you in the Appalachians, you could be looking at, what are they saying, 10 inches more of rain?
Yeah, that's right, Tom. Potentially more now that the storm has intensified even further. This is why officials are warning everyone to get off the roads now, prepare and hunker down to weather Helene. Even though this storm is expected to weaken as it moves up here into the Carolinas, it is obviously going to pack a punch. One thing you'll notice, you see some roads flooded behind me. That is not Helene related. That is because another front has just been stalled here, providing inches and inches of rain. We're already at 1,000-year flood status. You can imagine as that rain starts to impact this region from Helene, combined with those winds, we're looking at catastrophic, historic flooding here, which is why there's states of emergency, both declared by the governor and local states of emergencies by multiple municipalities here. Nothing mandatory in terms of evacuations, but we can't expect that to change, especially as things progress, as this storm gets closer and closer. And we're looking at this point sometime in the very early hours as this system starts to make its way up here right now. And earlier we did encounter people already doing what you're told not to do, and that's drive through some of these flooded waters. I had one encounter with a man who says he was trying to get home to hunker down for this storm, but got caught here in this flooding. Take a listen to what he told me.
Uber stickers there. Is this your livelihood here?
It is. It is. Yeah. I live in Uber for a living. No, I'll have to figure it out with the insurance company. It's going to be rough for the next couple of weeks.
And if you had a little bit of trouble hearing that, he was a rideshare driver. He says that car was his livelihood, couldn't get it out. They eventually did with another tow truck. So at least he is home now preparing for this storm. And again, officials here urging anyone that's still out and about to get what you need, stay home for this storm, especially now, as we know it is a Cat 4 storm. We shouldn't see those levels here in the Carolinas, but obviously this storm expected to pack quite a wallop, catastrophic and historic flooding here, Tom.
Okay, George, thank you very much in North Carolina. Let's now go back to Bill Karins, who has been staying on top of this all afternoon. And Bill, I got this alert from the National Hurricane Center, and they're now talking about a Cat 4 storm.
Yeah, not a surprise. I mean, we can see it ourselves from the radar. It looks healthier. It looks more like a classic hurricane. The spiraling bands, lightning in the center of the eye, and the eye is becoming more well-defined, and the eye is actually shrinking on itself, which actually is an indication of a stronger storm. It can wrap up more fastly. It's the center of the storm itself.
Hey, Bill, can we stop just right there? You just said it could get even stronger. Are we looking at the possibility now that this thing could grow to a Cat 5?
I mean, I'm not going to say it couldn't because we got 5 to 6 hours to go before landfall. It would be a little bit of a stretch. We're at what did we say? It's now 130. It'd have to get to 155. So that's a pretty big jump to go in like 4 or 5 hours. So it's not impossible, but most likely this will be a high-end Category 4 if it keeps at the current pace of intensity. I mean, we're going to rapidly move this towards the coast. Then we're going to get some of the friction from the coast. So that hopefully, will stop the intensification. But you can see the actual center of the eye here, and what we don't want to see is the bright colors, the purples and the reds. These are intense thunderstorms, and when they wrap all the way around the center, it allows the storm to get much stronger more quickly, and that's what's been happening here over the last couple hours. And if I stop it, the eye is now about 34 miles wide. Earlier today, it was like 45 to 50 miles wide, and that's why the storm was kind of lingering as a Category 1, Category 2. Now it's tightening itself up, and then the winds are just, it's much more efficient at taking those high winds all the way down to the surface. So here's the actual update from the Hurricane Center. It's moving at 23 miles per hour. It's about 120 miles due west of Tampa. And as we've been saying, you've been watching those pictures there. Tampa is high tide was at 6:15. So we're 15 minutes past it. Low tide was at 6:15. Now we're going to slowly begin to approach high tide, which is just after midnight tonight. And that water level is going to go up another 2 feet because of that alone. And then when we add up the storm surge, we could add another 3 to 4 feet to the pictures that you're seeing there. And that's what we're going to be monitoring right through the evening. So the two big stories that we have to watch out for is who's going to get the Category 4 eye wall. because that's where the destruction will be, unfortunately, for those communities. So that's one thing we'll watch throughout the night. And right now it looks to be somewhere between Tallahassee and Perry, Florida. So that's right up in this region. And it's incredible that in 6 hours from now, 5 hours from now, they could have 120-mile-per-hour winds. And right now it's at 17 and 22. It's like a little breeze blowing through the trees. So that's why I'm referring to this more like a huge tornado going through than I am a classic hurricane with the slow ramp up. I mean, it's just going to hit, it's going to go boom, it's going to race through, and then it's going to be over. And it's going to, that whole process is going to take about 3 to 4 hours at landfall. So, this is that path from the Hurricane Center, and you can see they kind of have it splitting right between Tallahassee and Perry. The right side is the dirty, the stronger side. But, Tom, even with a Category 4, if Tallahassee goes through the backside of the eye, that's still pretty intense and a lot of damage, probably worse than they've ever seen. So don't get me wrong for all our friends in Tallahassee. You still have a very difficult night coming.
Well, you've just said probably the worst they've ever seen, and that's similar to what the mayor said from Tallahassee. That's what they're expecting, the worst that they've ever seen. And you said that we're talking about 3 to 4 hours at landfall and at midnight. I mean, talk about a terrifying night to weather through, to ride through a Category 4.
And when we see that eye get towards the coast, they're going to issue, an extreme wind warning. So it's the equivalent of saying a tornado is coming through. And when that happens, they're going to have telling everyone to go to their shelters. And that's going to happen somewhere up here, in between the Tallahassee and Perry area, maybe in both of the areas, and get back to the radar. And so when that happens, you do exactly what you would if there was a tornado. You go into your safe room, you get a mattress, you pull it over your head, you go in the bathtub, closet with your kids, and that's going to be going on at midnight tonight, and it's going to sound like a train's going through. It's scary stuff for those people that didn't get out of the way.
Okay. I tell you what, we're going to take a quick break here, Bill. When we come back, much more coverage of Hurricane Helene. Again, you're looking at, I believe you're looking at the south side, if I'm not mistaken, of the Skyway Bridge there, the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. As you can see, the police there have closed off that highway. They don't want anybody on that bridge when you've got winds pushing 70 miles per hour. And next, we're going to talk to one sheriff about his message to people who are thinking they may try to ride the storm out. So that's coming up next. Back now with our continuing coverage of a Category 4 hurricane, Helene, as it now makes its way up through the Gulf of Mexico and targeting the Big Bend of Florida towards Tallahassee. Let's check on the middle of the state quickly. Let's bring in Hallie Crumble-Holmes. She's in Lake County, Florida. That's to the west of Orlando and really not far from the Villages and from the Disney theme park, right? Hallie, it looks like you're getting some rain there, but what's it look like?
Yes, we haven't had too much rain yet, at least not the worst of it. But the town that we're in is actually along the St. Johns River, so they are already seeing some flooding. We've had a really wet September here. You can see this part of this patio we're on right here. It butts up to a canal just off of the river. They've already been overtaken by some of the water. And at this point, like I said, we really haven't seen the worst of the rain that we're expecting from Helene. So people here are pretty prepared for it to get worse at this point.
I'm just curious, Hallie. I don't mean to blindside you. If you don't know, that's fine. Any idea of the theme parks? Have they closed down, or the Universal and Disney and SeaWorld because of this storm, even though it's way off in the Gulf of Mexico?
So Disney was still open today. I do believe they have some special Halloween events. I believe those may have been impacted by this. Some of the water parks, those were closed. I'm not positive on Universal and SeaWorld. People were still posting from Disney World, but it was raining pretty significantly there. It's obviously not a great place to be. And when lightning is in the vicinity, that is when they stop to run some of the rides. So obviously not an ideal time to be in the theme parks.
Yeah. Thank you, Hallie. Incidentally, there was supposed to be a SpaceX Crew 9 launch at nearby Cocoa Beach at the Kennedy Space Center tomorrow. No, it was supposed to be today, actually, but they postponed that because of the storm. they're hoping that they can get that off come Saturday. Again, Crew 9 from SpaceX carrying 2 astronauts to the International Space Station. Hurricane Helene bearing down on Florida, and the storm already is bringing intense and damaging winds and flooding to the state. And one of the more concerning trends in Florida right now is that people are not able to get home insurance coverage, as we've been discussing. NBC's Yasmin Vesugian has been doing a deep dive on this one. Yasmin, many insurance companies have actually pulled out completely of Florida, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty startling, the numbers, numbers that I didn't even really know until I started looking into this thing. A lot of folks that are just completely uninsured in the state of Florida, especially because they're kind of in the path of this destruction, getting kind of pummeled over and over again as they have over the years, and the storm's getting worse every single time. If you're looking at some of the numbers here, 1 in 6, 18% of Florida homeowners do not have insurance at all. 20% paying over $4,000 a year for insurance. That is the biggest share in the country, $4,000 a year, some paying upwards of $10,000 as well. And by the way, the policies that they are getting, it seems, aren't even necessarily covering the damage. Let's not forget, every time you file with an insurance company saying, okay, my windows were blown out, my garage was blown out, I need this repaired, that repaired, your premium goes up, your payments go up. And the more and more we have these storms, and the worse these storms get, the worse the damage becomes, the more money you have to pay out. In the last hour, our team spoke to someone who was kind of in the path of this storm. She's still recovering from Hurricane Ian. She didn't get the money that she was kind of promised when it came to what she valued many of her belongings at in her home. And so because of that, Tom, she didn't even get homeowners insurance after that because it was so cost prohibitive for her. So think about that, right? Her home isn't even back to 100% since the last hurricane. She's now in the path of destruction again. She's at her parents' home, not at her own home. And again, she's not going to be able to get the recovery that she needs. She's going to have to obviously tap into emergency management services from FEMA. But the numbers are troubling when it comes to insurance, and the number of folks really in that state specifically, which gets hammered the most by these hurricanes, that are kind of flying blind here.
You know, you quoted a stat when we talked an hour ago about the average cost of insurance for a homeowner in Florida, and you were saying like $10,000 was not unheard of.
No.
By comparison, and that's I'm guessing that's for like a ranch, right? That is significantly more than what you would pay up in the Mid-Atlantic. Go ahead.
The individual that was paying $10,000 basically was a person who owned 2 separate homes, but between those two separate homes, they were paying $10,000 in homeowners insurance. But some folks are paying that much, especially when it comes to the square footage. I mean, for most people that have homeowners insurance, they know how it's assessed, right? If you've already filed with your insurance, for instance, in another home, and then you're buying a new home, right, you are then assessed for that new home. And they look at you and they say, okay, let me see. You filed a claim at your previous home, and we had to pay you $50,000 because of whatever happened. So now we're going to charge you $3,000, right? But if you're looking at what's happening in the state of Florida in comparison to the rest of the country, on average, we're looking at $4,000 a year in homeowners insurance. That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money when you think about the average income in this country. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, by comparison, that's a heck of a lot more than I think the average across the country. I'm ad-libbing that. I don't have the data in front of me, but I know what I pay.
It is. The share of that is higher than anywhere else in the country in the state of Florida. The other thing that we talked about, Tom, the last hour that I actually looked into was scammers, because I know you had some particular interest in that. And one of the things that I think is also important to look out for, because, you know, as we mentioned, we said take photographs of everything, make a list of all the things inside your home before the storm, after the storm. Don't try and fix it. Take photographs. Stay safe. Call your insurance company immediately after the storm is done to kind of report back on all the damages there, and then you have to wait for a response from the insurance company. And by the way, that's not going to come quick. But look out for those scammers. And I looked into the scamming side of things, and one of the things that's important to look out for is you do have folks that are going to be approaching you, especially in the aftermath of things, and they're going to try explain to you your policy, and they may not be knowing your policy, right? But they may be explaining to you certain limits on your policy, for instance, or timeframes on your policy, so that they can then capitalize on your vulnerabilities and say, well, let me fix this for you because, for instance, your policy requires this and that. So again, stick with your policy, know your policy, speak to your insurance company.
And be skeptical of anybody who shows up claiming that they can do repairs fast or they represent an insurance company.
Yeah.
Yasmin, thank you very much.
Thanks,
That's
Tom.
just great value-added information today. With the storm surge warnings in effect for almost all of Florida's west coast, we're looking at how dangerous it might get with warnings that this storm is still getting stronger, a Cat 4 already. And we're talking about landfall after 11 p.m. at night. We're coming back. Stay with us. We're back, continuing live coverage of Hurricane Helene, and to update you, we are talking about a Category 4 storm already. Bill Karins tells us unlikely to hit Category 5, but he would not rule it out. A couple of stats, 130 miles per hour, the maximum winds right now, according to the National Hurricane Center. The minimum central pressure has decreased as well. That's concerning, and right now it is about 165 miles south of Tallahassee, about 120 miles west of Tampa at this very moment. Category 4 again, and before it even makes landfall, nearly 300,000 people are already without power in the state. Catastrophic storm surge is expected to slam the Florida coast with flooding. Listen to this, flooding up to 20 feet. So what exactly does that look like? How dangerous might it get? NBC News meteorologist Bill Karins is showing us now with the help of virtual reality.
When storm surge begins to move into your neighborhood, the initial rush of water can come in very suddenly, sometimes in a matter of minutes, quickly cutting off your chance to evacuate. By the time the water depth reaches 3 feet, it can already be too late. This is now a life-threatening situation. Flooded roads will cut off emergency services, and driving or wading through the water to escape will be impossible. As the surge continues to rise past 6 feet, the enormous force of the water pushing into a house can blow out the walls. At 10 feet, water will inundate the entire first floor, making a retreat to the upper floor your only option. Storm surge more than 10 feet can move well inland, sweeping houses off their foundations and destroying entire neighborhoods. In the worst hurricanes, the surge can reach depths of over 20 feet. The threat from storm surge is not something to be underestimated. And with rising sea levels due to climate change, it is likely to be an even greater threat in the years to come.
Okay, Bill, thank you. We'll check back with you. With just hours to landfall, county authorities across Florida are scrambling to get ready for Helene. I'm joined now by the Levy County Sheriff, Bobby McCallum. Sheriff, it's good to see you. For our viewers who are not in Florida, Levy County is between Tampa and Tallahassee, and I'm guessing you're already starting to feel the effects of it in terms of the wind and the rain hitting your coast?
Yes, not so much the rain yet. We are having our rain showers, but we're certainly beginning to feel the deterioration of conditions here, especially in our coastal areas. We have about 60 miles of Gulf Coast in our county, populated by two different cities, Cedar Key and Yankeetown. And we're certainly seeing a difference there in the water coming into Cedar Key and Yankeetown. And as we know, we're still hours away from our peak surge time.
Yeah, I understand that you are under a mandatory evacuation order there. What's your message to people in the county, and for that matter, across the Gulf Coast, who may be thinking that they can ride this thing out if we're now at a Cat 4 already?
Our message has been strong for the last 2 days that you need to get out of your coastal communities and come to the shelters that we have open in Levy County. This is a dangerous, potential catastrophic storm for us and storm surge, something like we've not seen forever, probably, at least in my time. You know, 9 feet of water, Cedar Key, Yankeetown can take fairly well. But when you get above that, and what we're seeing now is the projection for 10 to 15 feet or higher. So we're very concerned, and we need folks to get out. The conditions now are getting where we can't get to you any longer. We've just reached 40-mile sustained winds, and we have to bring all of our first response vehicles, emergency medical in, our deputies and all off the road at that point when we get to that point of sustained winds. So,
I was just going to ask you, you are right now looking at this storm that's about 120 miles west of you, but at 40 miles per hour, you pull your fire and police and EMS people off the roads?
Yes, it becomes too dangerous for them, especially the EMS personnel with their rescue units. Comes too dangerous for them as well as our personnel. Now, inland in our county, we can still get to you because those winds haven't quite reached there. Projections even from inland, the Chiefland and Fannin Springs and those areas are gusts of over 90 miles an hour is what we're still hearing. But on that coast, we're in dangerous times already, and people just need to get to the shelters that still can.
Levy County Sheriff Bobby McCallum, you've got a long night ahead of you. We appreciate you taking a moment. Thank you, Sheriff. Coming up from us, take a look right now at Helene's effects. If you've been there, you recognize it. That's Key West. Look at the water at Key West. I mean, you're talking, 100-plus miles away from Tampa already. Nearly 300,000 people are already without power across Florida, many more at risk. And we are tracking the storm's path as it strengthens. It is a Cat 4 right now, and we are, 5 hours ahead of landfall. We're coming back. Back now, our coverage continues streaming on NBC News Now. Hurricane Helene, it is now a Category 4 storm. In the last hour, it has been upgraded, and it will grow even stronger through the night before it makes landfall. Thousands have already evacuated. Others are taking shelter as we speak. Nearly 300,000 don't have any power right now. The storm's surge is already pouring over highways and bridges up and down the Gulf Coast. NBC's Bill Karins is back with us. Bill, I'm going to ask you, give us the hit, runs, and errors, the latest stats on this storm right now.
Yeah, so the storm surge is around 4 to 5 feet in total up and down the west coast of Florida. I was just looking at Fort Myers. You're about 5 feet. Tampa's about 4.5 feet. Clearwater Beach about 4 3/4 feet. And we're coming off of low tide. So now we're going to head towards that next high tide cycle. So the water is going to rise quickly in many areas. And obviously the storm is still intensifying. Now that Category 4 spiraling bands are hitting the Pinellas County area. This is where wind gusts could be in excess of about 70 miles per hour. We've already had numerous gusts, at least close to that. The eye itself is about 35 miles wide. When this comes on shore, this is where that destruction will occur. And so now we really want to know who's going to have to go through that eye. Where is going to be the worst destruction, the most trees, structural damage, the homes. So our computer models still have value. Yes, they're all locked right in. The black line is the hurricane center path, but numerous models are just to the right of this. This is Perry, Florida here. This would be on the dirty side, what they call of the hurricane. Tallahassee would be on the backside. Other small towns we're going to start talking about, too, because this is going to go far inland, like Monticello, Thomasville, Valdosta, Lee. We're going to be watching all of you closely, because if you go through that eye, that's where the destruction is going to be. And, of course, that storm surge. These numbers are going to continue to grow quickly as we go throughout the rest of this evening. We're going to closely be watching how much damage is done from the storm surge, especially in the Tampa area, in the next couple hours.
Yep, and the capital, Tallahassee, is in the bullseye. Bill, thank you very much. We're coming back in just a minute, continuing coverage of Hurricane Helene on NBC News Now, live on the ground in Florida as the storm picks up pace. Continuing coverage on NBC News Now of Hurricane Helene. We're going to go straight now to NBC's Jay Gray. He's in Tallahassee, Florida, the capital of Florida, of course. And, Jay, they're talking about 1,000 trees coming down where you are.
Yeah, Tom, look, this is a city that's proud of its trees. 55% of the land here is covered in trees. Some of these oaks that are hundreds of years old, and the concern is obviously with winds by the time the storm gets here, 120 miles an hour, perhaps even stronger. Gusts definitely stronger. We're going to see a lot of those trees come down and bring power lines with them, obviously. There's a big concern about that. What we're feeling on the ground right now is the wind starting to adjust a bit. We're seeing it start to move a bit. The rain is picking up. We've had some of those outer bands, which are scattered, and you know, it's on again, off again rain. Now it's become relatively steady, and from here in, we're just going to see it, Tom, pick up. The conditions are going to continue to drop, get much worse as this storm continues to feed on that warm Gulf water and intensify. Look, that's like rocket fuel for this system, right? So it's going to continue to grow. I know you've talked about it, but it's got a wind field, a footprint of almost 500 miles. So it's going to swallow Tallahassee as it moves through. This is right in the path of this storm. And while we are a bit inland, we're going to feel the full effects of Helene as it moves in the city. And I've looked around a little bit. it's mostly clear. That's the great news, right? People are either inside embracing or they've gone away, and we have seen a lot of people evacuate. So that's something that's very important. Of course, there are about 7,000 students at the universities, the colleges here in Tallahassee, and so they've made provisions for a lot of those students. Many likely have never been through a storm, and certainly not a storm like this. You know, we've covered a lot of storms, Tom. This one is significant. This one is much different.
It is indeed 130 miles per hour, according to the National Hurricane Center. It is still at about 125 miles west of Tampa right now, and it is traveling at about 23 miles per hour with the barometric pressure dropping, which is generally not a good sign. Continuing coverage on NBC News now through the night. Live coverage of Hurricane Helene, a Category 4 storm. Stay with us.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.